People often ask me a question that sounds incredibly simple. If it was so bad, why didn't you just leave? I've heard that question about abusive relationships, addiction, gambling, toxic jobs, pornography, cults, about almost every difficult situation you can imagine. The assumption behind all of those questions is the same. If you knew it was hurting you, why didn't you just stop? And it's a fair question, but I think it's the wrong question. The better question is this: why do otherwise intelligent, capable people stay in situations that they know are not good for them? Because once you understand that, you stop seeing weakness and you start seeing human psychology. As I'm recording this, one of the biggest stories in the country involves 16 children who were allegedly found in horrific living conditions. Before I say anything else, I want to be very clear. If the allegations are true, those children are absolutely the victims. They deserve justice, they deserve safety, and they deserve every opportunity to heal. But as I've watched the conversation unfold online, I've noticed something. I've seen thousands of comments saying, she could have left. She had opportunities to get help. She chose to stay. Maybe, maybe not. The truth is, none of us knows enough to say that with certainty. Reports indicate she had her first child at 13 years old, and she was married by 15. Those facts don't tell us what happened inside that home, but they do raise questions about grooming, coercion, and control. Questions about what her life may have looked like long before any of us knew her name. Now, let me be crystal clear. Understanding someone's psychology is not the same as excusing their behavior. If those allegations are true, every adult who harmed those children should be held accountable. Those two ideas can exist at the same time: accountability and understanding. In fact, I would argue that if we want to prevent tragedies like this from happening again, we have to be willing to understand how they happen. One of the biggest misconceptions I see is the belief that intelligent people do not make bad decisions. And I used to believe that too. After all, I was a biology professor. I taught math, I taught engineering, I taught science. I eventually earned my doctorate. People assume that education somehow protects you from manipulation, and it does not. Our intelligence helps us to solve problems, but it doesn't make us immune to fear, to hope, to shame, or love. Those emotions influence every human being. And here's something I wish more people understood. Life-changing mistakes almost never begin with life-changing decisions. They begin with tiny ones. One compromise, one exception, one rationalization, one promise that things will be different next time. And that's true in abusive relationships. It's true with addiction, gambling, pornography, unhealthy friendships, careers. I could go on. Rarely does someone wake up one morning and decide, hey, I'd like to ruin my life today. People adapt, slowly, almost invisibly, until one day they look around and realize they're living a life that they never imagined accepting. And there are several psychological forces working against us. One is hope. Hope is beautiful. Hope also keeps people trapped. We tell ourselves, they'll change. This is just a rough season. It'll get better. And sometimes hope is justified. Sometimes it quietly becomes the thing keeping us stuck. And then there's fear. Fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of losing your children, your pets, losing your home, and fear of what other people might think. Fear changes the way your brain calculates risk. And that's something that I know personally. People have asked me why I didn't ask for help sooner. The answer wasn't that help didn't exist. The answer was fear. I wasn't just afraid people would judge me. I was afraid of what would happen if he found out that I had tried to get help. When somebody controls your world, asking for help doesn't always feel like the safest option. Sometimes it feels like the most dangerous one. Someone outside the relationship sees an exit, Someone inside the relationship may see a threat. That doesn't mean every person who stays is being abused. It doesn't mean every person who causes harm was first harmed. But it does mean that human behavior is often far more complicated than the internet would like it to be. And then there's something psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy. In simple terms, when we have invested so much in something, it becomes harder to walk away. We don't want to believe all of that investment was for nothing, so we invest more. When I look back on my own life, I don't see one catastrophic decision. I do see dozens of small ones, compromises that seem manageable, promises that I wanted to believe, fear that shaped my decisions, and hope that tomorrow would somehow be different. And I think that's something that almost everyone can relate to. Maybe your story isn't about an abusive relationships. Maybe it was a business, a marriage, a friendship, a career, an addiction. Different stories, but the same psychology. One thing I've learned over the last decade is that understanding psychology does not remove personal responsibility. It does explain it. An explanation matters because when we understand why people make difficult decisions, we're more likely to respond with curiosity instead of certainty, including toward ourselves. I still believe deeply in personal responsibility, but I also believe that responsibility and compassion can exist together. Those are not opposing ideas. They are complementary. So maybe the next time you hear someone say, "Why didn't they just leave?" Pause for a moment, because maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, what made leaving feel so impossible? When we start asking better questions, we usually find better answers. And that's what this channel is about. Not telling you what to think, but giving you something to think about.